The gunshot echoed through Dusty Creek, Wyoming territory, as Prudence Miller stood frozen in the market square, her hands trembling around a near-empty coin purse. 1877 had been the cruelest of years. 4 months since Thomas had been lowered into the unforgiving earth, leaving her with 3 hungry children and a mountain of debt. The storekeeper's refusal still rang in her ears, humiliation burning her cheeks as townspeople pretended not to notice her predicament. "Madam, I've told you 3 times now, your credit's run out." "Cash only," Mr. Wilkins declared, arms crossed over his considerable girth. Prudence swallowed hard, the weight of her children's hunger crushing her chest. 8-year-old Emma clutched her skirts while 5-year-old twins James and Joseph stood wide-eyed beside her, their little faces pale with hunger. The meager coins in her purse wouldn't buy half of what they needed. "Please, Mr. Wilkins, just until the end of the month when what, Mrs. Miller?" Another empty promise. "Your husband's been dead since spring, and I'm running a business, not a charity." The market square fell uncomfortably silent. Prudence felt the weight of a dozen stares burning into her back. Her children pressed closer to her skirts, sensing their mother's distress. Then came the sound of spurs jingling against wooden planks. Heavy boots thudded across the boardwalk, and a deep voice cut through the tension. "Put it on my account, Wilkins." Prudence turned to face the stranger, a tall figure silhouetted against the bright Wyoming sun. As he stepped forward, she saw a man with weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair touched his shoulders beneath a dust-covered Stetson, and a week's worth of stubble framed a strong jawline. "I don't need charity, sir," Prudence managed, though her empty stomach betrayed her with a growl. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "It ain't charity, madam." He crouched down to the children's level, his voice softening. "Seems to me these young'uns look mighty hungry." "Your kids eat at my table tonight, I insist." Little Emma peered up at the stranger with wary eyes. "Mama says we shouldn't talk to strangers." The man chuckled, a warm sound that seemed to chase away some of the market's chill. "Your mama's right about that. Owen Blackwood, madam." He tipped his hat. "I own the Double B Ranch just outside town. Not exactly a stranger, though I'll admit I keep to myself." Mr. Wilkins cleared his throat. "Blackwood's good for it, Mrs. Miller. One of the few who pays his bills on time." Prudence hesitated, pride warring with necessity. The twins' hollow cheeks and Emma's pleading eyes made the decision for her. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. We accept your kind offer." The words nearly choked her, but she forced them out. Owen nodded, his expression unreadable as he turned to Wilkins. "The lady will be needing flour, sugar, coffee, and whatever else she puts on the counter. Add some candy for the little ones." The storekeeper's demeanor changed instantly. "Right away, Mr. Blackwood." As Wilkins hurried to gather the supplies, Prudence studied Owen Blackwood more carefully. His clothes were well worn but of good quality. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the revolver looking like a natural extension of the man rather than a weapon. His hands were calloused, marked with small scars that spoke of years of hard work. "I don't know how to repay you," she said quietly. "Told you it ain't charity." He nodded toward her children. "Just dinner. My cook, Hank, makes the best stew west of the Mississippi. Be at the ranch by sundown. I'll send my wagon for you." Before she could respond, he touched the brim of his hat again and strode away, spurs jingling with each step. "Mama, are we really going to a ranch?" Joseph asked, eyes wide with excitement. Prudence watched Owen Blackwood's broad shoulders disappear down the street. "Yes, it seems we are." "That's Owen Blackwood," whispered Martha Jenkins, the seamstress, suddenly appearing at Prudence's elbow. "Keeps to himself mostly. Came here 5 years back, built that ranch from nothing. They say he fought in the war, though no one knows which side." "I don't care about his past," Prudence said, watching as Wilkins bagged her groceries with newfound respect. "I only care that my children will eat tonight." "There are worse men to be indebted to," Martha said with a knowing smile, "and fewer handsomer ones." Prudence felt heat rise to her cheeks. "It's just dinner, Martha, nothing more." But as she gathered her supplies and led her children home to their small, crumbling cabin at the edge of town, Prudence couldn't help but wonder about the mysterious rancher with the storm-colored eyes who had stepped in when no one else would. The wagon arrived precisely at 5 o'clock. A gangly young man with freckles splashed across his face introduced himself as Liam, one of Owen's ranch hands. Prudence had spent the afternoon washing her children's faces and mending their clothes as best she could. Her own faded blue dress had seen better days, but it was the cleanest she owned. "Mr. Blackwood sends his apologies, madam," Liam said, helping them into the wagon. "Had to ride out to check on a broken fence line, said he'd meet you at the house." The Double B Ranch sprawled across a valley 15 minutes outside town. As they crested the final hill, Prudence gasped. A large 2-story house stood proudly amid several outbuildings. White painted fences enclosed paddocks where horses grazed peacefully. It wasn't ostentatious like some of the mansions she'd seen back east, but it bespoke prosperity and permanence. "It's like a castle, Mama," Emma exclaimed. Liam chuckled. "Mr. Blackwood built most of it himself, started with just the main room and kept adding on. Says a house should grow with its family, though it's just him living there now." Prudence caught the now but didn't press. Every soul in the West carried secrets. The wagon pulled up to the house just as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. The front door swung open, and a round-faced man with a white apron tied around his considerable middle stepped out. "You must be Mrs. Miller and the little ones. I'm Hank. Cook, housekeeper, and general nuisance according to the boss." He winked at the children. Come in. Dinner's almost ready, and I've made apple pie for dessert." The interior of the house surprised Prudence. She'd expected a bachelor's Spartan quarters, but instead found a comfortable, well-maintained home. Polished wooden floors, a large stone fireplace, and solid furniture filled the main room. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that would have impressed any Eastern scholar. "Mr. Blackwood reads?" she asked before she could stop herself. Hank laughed heartily. "Every night. Man's educated, though he doesn't make a show of it. Now, let me show you where to wash up before dinner." The children's eyes grew wide at the indoor pump at the kitchen sink. Such luxuries were rare in these parts. While they marveled at the running water, the front door opened, and Owen Blackwood stepped inside. He'd cleaned up since their encounter in town. His hair was damp, face freshly shaved, and he'd changed into a clean shirt that stretched across broad shoulders. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, Prudence forgot to breathe. "Mrs. Miller," he said with a nod. "Glad you could make it." "Thank you for your invitation, Mr. Blackwood." An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Joseph approached Owen with the directness only a 5-year-old could muster. "Do you have horses we can see?" Owen's face softened as he looked down at the boy. "I do indeed. 23 of them, plus 6 new foals born this spring." "Would you like to meet them after dinner?" Joseph and James nodded enthusiastically, while Emma maintained a cautious distance, eyeing the tall stranger warily. "Don't mind Emma," Prudence said softly. "She's been protective since her father passed." Something flickered in Owen's eyes, understanding, perhaps even recognition of a shared pain. "No offense taken, madam. Trust is earned, not given freely. Your daughter's smart to be careful." Hank announced dinner, and they gathered around a large oak table. The promised stew was indeed delicious, rich with beef and vegetables. Fresh baked bread and butter completed the meal. Prudence had to remind the twins to slow down, though her own stomach demanded she follow their example. Owen ate quietly, occasionally answering the boys' eager questions about ranch life. His responses were patient, never talking down to them. Prudence noticed how he subtly ensured everyone had seconds before taking more himself, how he slipped Emma an extra piece of bread when he thought no one was looking. As Hank served the apple pie, Owen finally addressed Prudence directly. "How long have you been in Dusty Creek, Mrs. Miller?" "Just over a year. My husband Thomas brought us west from Pennsylvania. He'd heard there was good farmland to be had, and was there." Prudence's smile was tight. Not the kind he'd hoped for. The soil's too dry, the seasons too harsh. He worked himself to death trying to make that land yield something. Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Wyoming isn't kind to farmers. Ranching suits it better." "Yes, well, we learned that lesson too late." She glanced at her children, lowering her voice. I've been taking in laundry and mending, but it's barely enough. What will you do now? The directness of his question caught her off guard. Most people tiptoed around her precarious situation. I don't know, she admitted. The bank is threatening to take our cabin for Thomas's debts. I've been thinking of heading to Denver. I have a cousin there who might help us start over. Owen seemed to consider this as he finished his pie. After dinner, true to his word, he took them to see the horses. The twins raced ahead while Emma stayed close to Prudence, though her curiosity was evident in her darting glances. This is Thunder, Owen said, introducing them to a magnificent black stallion. He was wild when I found him. Took me 6 months to earn his trust. He's beautiful, Prudence murmured, admiring the powerful animal. Sometimes the most worthwhile things take time and patience. Owen's eyes met hers over the stall door, and something unspoken passed between them. A commotion from the far end of the stable drew their attention. The twins had discovered a litter of kittens nestled in the hay, their mother watching protectively nearby. Mama, can we keep one? James pleaded, cradling a tiny orange tabby. We don't have, Prudence began. Actually, Owen interrupted, I could use some good mousers in the barn. But they're still too young to leave their mother. Maybe in a few weeks, if you boys want to come back and check on them. The twins' faces lit up, and even Emma's reserve cracked at the sight of the kittens. As dusk deepened, Liam brought the wagon around to take them home. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Blackwood, Prudence said as they prepared to leave, and for your help at the store. Owen, he corrected, and it was my pleasure, Mrs. Miller. Prudence, she offered in return, something in his expression shifted, softened. Prudence, he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. I have a proposition for you if you're willing to hear it. She tensed involuntarily, years of hardship having taught her to be wary of men's propositions. Reading her expression, Owen quickly added, Not that kind, madam. I'm looking for someone to help Hank with the house. Cooking, cleaning, mending, it's too much for him alone, especially with Roundup coming. It would be proper work for proper pay. Prudence stared at him, searching for the catch. Why me? You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're proud but practical. I know you put your children first. I know you're not afraid of hard work. He gestured toward the house. There's a small cabin out back where my foreman used to live before he moved to town with his new bride. You and your children would have a place to stay, meals included and wages besides. The offer was almost too good to be true. I don't need charity, Mr. Blackwood Owen, and I'm not offering any. I need help, you need work. Simple as that. His gaze was steady, honest. Think on it. The offer stands. As the wagon pulled away, Emma finally spoke. I like his horses, she admitted grudgingly. Prudence smiled, squeezing her daughter's hand. So do I. That night, after tucking the children into bed, Prudence sat at their small table, calculating what little money remained against the mounting debts. Owen Blackwood's offer circled in her mind. It would solve their immediate problems: food, shelter, income. But it would also place them squarely under his influence, his control. Yet there had been nothing in his manner to suggest ulterior motives. No lingering glances, no inappropriate comments, just straightforward help offered when they needed it most. By morning, her decision was made. They would accept Owen Blackwood's offer temporarily until she could make better arrangements. She would maintain her independence, her dignity. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. But as she drifted off to sleep, Prudence couldn't help remembering the warmth in those storm-gray eyes, the gentleness in hands that could break a wild stallion. For the first time since Thomas died, she felt something other than fear for the future. 3 days later, they moved into the foreman's cabin at the Double B Ranch. It was small but sound, with 2 bedrooms, a main room with a cookstove, and luxuries like glass windows and a wooden floor. Owen had stocked it with basic supplies and left them to settle in with a promise to discuss duties the next day. That evening, a knock at the door revealed Hank, arms laden with a covered dish. Figured you might be too tired to cook tonight, he said, placing the stew on the table. Boss said to make sure you had everything you needed. That's very kind, but we're fine, Prudence assured him. Hank studied her for a moment. You know, Mrs. Miller, the boss doesn't do things without reason. He's not a man for charity or pretense. Then why help us? He doesn't know me or my children. The cook's expression softened. Maybe he sees something worth helping. Owen Blackwood's been alone a long time. Sometimes a man gets tired of his own company. Before she could press further, Hank bid her good night and departed, leaving Prudence with more questions than answers. The following morning, Owen showed her around the main house, explaining what needed to be done. The work was straightforward: cleaning, laundry, helping with meals, mending. The pay was more than fair. The children can stay with you while you work, he added. There's plenty of safe places for them to play, and the hands know to keep an eye out. When school starts in the fall, Liam can drive them in with the wagon. Prudence was surprised. You've thought of everything. Owen's expression was unreadable. I try to be thorough, Mrs. Miller. Prudence, she reminded him. If I'm to work here, we should dispense with formalities. A hint of a smile. Prudence then, over the next few weeks, they settled into a routine. Prudence worked alongside Hank, learning the rhythms of the ranch. The twins followed the ranch hands like adoring puppies, collecting eggs, feeding chickens, and helping with simple chores. Even Emma slowly emerged from her shell, especially after Owen gave her a gentle mare named Daisy to learn riding. Prudence observed Owen when he didn't know she was watching. How he listened carefully when his men spoke. How he treated the animals with respect and patience. How he read by lamplight long after others had gone to bed, sometimes until dawn painted the horizon. One evening in late July, she found him on the porch, staring at the sunset. She'd brought him coffee, a small courtesy that had become habit. Thank you, he said, accepting the cup. Beautiful evening. It is. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. Why did you really help us that day in town, Owen? He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. I know what it's like to watch your children go hungry. To feel helpless against forces you can't control. You have children. The thought surprised her. She'd seen no evidence of family. Pain flashed across his face, quickly masked. Had a boy and a girl, along with a wife. Yellow fever took them all back in '67. I'm so sorry, she whispered, understanding now the shadows that sometimes darkened his eyes. It was a lifetime ago, in Virginia. He took a sip of coffee. After they died, I couldn't stay, ended up fighting in the last years of the war, then drifted west. Needed open spaces to outrun the memories. Did it work? The outrunning? His smile was sad. Not entirely, but this place helps, building something new. Impulsively, she touched his arm. Thank you for telling me. He covered her hand with his own just for a moment, then released it. Your children are fortunate to have you, Prudence. You're stronger than you know. That night, Prudence lay awake, thinking about Owen Blackwood's lost family, about the pain he carried beneath his quiet strength. She recognized in him the same grief she wrestled with, the sharp-edged absence of someone loved, the struggle to rebuild a life from shattered pieces. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge the growing warmth she felt in his presence. The quickening of her pulse when their hands accidentally touched. The comfort of his deep voice in conversation. It both frightened and exhilarated her, this unexpected stirring of feelings she'd thought buried with Thomas. August brought the hottest days of summer. The children spent mornings helping with chores and afternoons splashing in the creek that ran through the property. Prudence settled comfortably into her role, finding satisfaction in work well done and the security of regular meals and a sound roof. One particularly scorching afternoon, she was hanging laundry when she spotted Owen returning from the range. Something was wrong. He slumped in the saddle, one hand pressed to his side. As he dismounted, he staggered, catching himself against the hitching post. Prudence dropped the wet sheet she was holding and ran to him. Owen, what happened? Nothing serious, he grunted, though his face was ashen. Steer got spooked, caught me against a fence post, probably just bruised ribs. But when he removed his hand from his side, his palm was slick with blood. Maybe a bit more than bruised, he admitted. With Hank's help, they got him inside and onto his bed. Prudence sent one of the hands for the doctor, then cut away Owen's shirt to reveal a deep gash along his ribs. That steer had horns, I take it, she said, keeping her voice steady despite the sight of so much blood. Owen attempted a smile that turned into a grimace. Sharp ones. While waiting for the doctor, she cleaned the wound as best she could, grateful for the skills she'd learned caring for injured farmhands. Owen watched her work, his breathing labored but controlled. "You've done this before," he observed. Farm accidents were common. Thomas once nearly lost a finger to a thresher. She wrung out a cloth in clean water. "Hold still, this will hurt." He hissed as she pressed the cloth against the wound but didn't pull away. "You have gentle hands, and you have a serious injury. Save your sweet talk for when you're not bleeding all over my clean sheets." That startled a laugh from him, followed immediately by a groan of pain. "Don't make me laugh, woman, doctor." Peterson arrived an hour later, stitched the wound, and left strict instructions for Owen to rest for at least a week. "Those ribs are badly bruised, and that gash was deep. You're lucky it didn't hit anything vital," the doctor warned. Of course, Owen was a terrible patient. By the second day, he was attempting to get up and check on ranch operations, only to be firmly sent back to bed by Prudence. "The ranch won't fall apart if you rest for a few days," she insisted, hands on hips as she blocked his bedroom doorway. "There's the roundup to prepare for, contracts to review, all of which can wait until you're not in danger of tearing your stitches and bleeding to death." She softened her tone. "Let people help you, Owen, just as you helped us." Something in her words reached him. He sank back against the pillows with a sigh. "You're a stubborn woman, Prudence Miller, and you're a stubborn man. We're well matched." The words slipped out before she could stop them, bringing a flush to her cheeks. A slow smile spread across his face. "Yes, I believe we are." To distract from the moment, she busied herself adjusting his blankets. "Hank's making beef broth for your supper. The children have been asking about you. Would you mind if they visited briefly?" "I'd like that," he said, his expression softening. "They're good kids." When the children came, even Emma showed concern for Mr. Owen, as they'd taken to calling him. Joseph and James solemnly reported on the ranch activities they'd observed, while Emma had picked wildflowers which she shyly presented to the injured rancher. "Thank you, Miss Emma," Owen said with formal gravity that made the girl smile. "These will certainly help me recover faster." After the children left, Prudence lingered to check his bandages. "They've grown fond of you," she said quietly. "The feeling is mutual." He caught her hand as she finished securing the fresh dressing. "And what about their mother? Has she grown fond of me as well?" The directness of his question startled her. Prudence looked into those storm-gray eyes and found she couldn't lie. "Perhaps she has, more than is wise." "Why unwise?" "Because we depend on you, for work, for shelter. It complicates things." He didn't release her hand. "Some things are worth complications." Before she could respond, Hank called from the kitchen that supper was ready. Prudence gently withdrew her hand. "Rest now, we can talk when you're stronger." But the moment had opened something between them that couldn't be closed again. By the end of the week, Owen was well enough to move around the house, though still banned from horseback riding or heavy lifting. Prudence found herself acting as his secretary, taking dictation for business correspondence and helping organize the ranch books. She discovered he was not merely successful but prosperous, with careful investments and sound business practices. "You're surprised," he noted, watching her expression as she reviewed the ledgers. "I shouldn't be. You've built all this from nothing. Of course you're smart with money." "Not always," he admitted. "Made plenty of mistakes along the way, lost everything once before I learned." One rainy afternoon, with the children napping and Hank gone to town for supplies, they sat by the fire in the main room. Owen had been reading aloud from The Count of Monte Cristo, his deep voice bringing the adventure to life. When the chapter ended, they fell into comfortable conversation. "Did you always want to be a rancher?" Prudence asked, setting aside her mending. "No, before the war I studied law, had a small practice in Richmond." He smiled at her surprise. "Hard to picture, isn't it? Me in a suit, arguing cases." "Actually, I can see it quite well. You have a way of making your point clear without raising your voice. A useful skill in court and with cattle." He shifted in his chair, wincing slightly at the pull of his healing wound. "What about you? What dreams did young Prudence have?" She laughed softly. "Nothing so grand as law or ranching. I wanted to be a teacher. I even taught at a small school in Pennsylvania for a year before I married Thomas. You'd make an excellent teacher. He studied her for a moment. Why did you stop? Married women weren't allowed to teach. Then the children came and, she shrugged, dreams change, adapt. They don't have to die, though. His voice was quiet but intense. Dusty Creek needs a proper teacher. The town council's been searching for months. Hope flickered briefly before reality doused it. I have no formal qualifications and 3 children to support. You have experience and determination. As for the children, he leaned forward. Prudence, I have a proposition for you. She raised an eyebrow, remembering their first such conversation. Another one, a different one. He took a deep breath. Stay not as my housekeeper, but as my wife. The words hung in the air between them. Prudence stared at him, certain she'd misheard. Your wife? I know it's sudden, perhaps even improper. But these past months, watching you with your children, seeing your strength and grace, I've come to care for you deeply. His eyes held hers, vulnerable yet determined. I'm not asking you to forget Thomas. I would never expect to replace what you had with him. But I believe we could build something good together. Owen, she struggled to organize her thoughts. This is unexpected, is it? He asked gently. Haven't you felt it too, this connection between us? She couldn't deny it. From that first day in the market, something had drawn her to this quiet, complex man. Yes, she admitted, but marriage is a serious step. I don't make the offer lightly. I would provide for you and your children. They would want for nothing education, opportunities, a secure future. And you could pursue your teaching if that's what you want. And what do you get from this arrangement? She asked, needing to understand his motivation. His smile was tinged with sadness. A second chance, companionship, a family again. I've been alone a long time, Prudence. The ranch is successful but empty at its heart. She stood, needing space to think. I can't answer right now. The children, of course. He rose as well, careful of his injury. Take all the time you need. The offer stands regardless of your answer. Your position here is secure either way. That night, Prudence lay awake in the foreman's cabin, Owen's proposal turning in her mind. Marriage. She hadn't considered remarrying. Thomas had been gone barely a year, yet life in the West was precarious for a widow with children. Practical considerations alone made Owen's offer attractive. But it wasn't just practicality that made her heart race when she thought of his words. There was genuine affection between them, perhaps even the beginnings of love. She respected him, enjoyed his company, admired his quiet integrity. The children adored him. Even Emma had blossomed under his patient attention. Could she open her heart again? Risk the pain of loss that had nearly broken her when Thomas died. The next morning, she found Owen at his desk, reviewing cattle sale contracts. He looked up when she entered, his expression carefully neutral. The children and I have been talking, she began, worry flickered across his face. About leaving, about staying. She took a deep breath. If your offer still stands, we accept. Joy transformed his features, erasing years of solitude in an instant, truly, on one condition. She held up a hand. This is a true marriage, Owen, not just an arrangement of convenience. I won't settle for less for my sake or yours. He crossed to her in 3 long strides, taking her hands in his. Prudence Miller, I want nothing less than a real marriage with you. I may have started with practical reasons, but my heart is fully engaged. His voice dropped to a whisper. I believe I'm falling in love with you. She squeezed his hands, her own emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Then yes, Owen Blackwood, I will marry you. His kiss was gentle, questioning at first, then deepening as she responded. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. The children, he asked, are cautiously excited. Emma made me promise you wouldn't try to replace their father. I told her you wouldn't dream of it. She's right. Thomas will always be their father, but I hope to earn my own place in their hearts. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Dusty Creek. The whole town turned out, curious about the taciturn rancher's sudden marriage to the widow Miller. Prudence wore a new blue dress that Owen had insisted on ordering from Denver. The children stood witness, Emma holding a bouquet of wildflowers matching the ones woven into Prudence's hair. After a brief honeymoon in Cheyenne, they returned to the ranch, now truly a family. Prudence and the children moved into the main house, though the transition wasn't without challenges. The twins adjusted quickly, delighted by their expanded territory and Owen's patient instruction in ranch matters. Emma maintained a careful distance, watching her new stepfather with wary eyes despite his unfailing kindness. Prudence herself had to navigate the shift from employee to wife and mistress of the household. There were awkward moments, misunderstandings, the natural friction of independent people learning to share space and decisions, but there were beautiful moments too. Evenings spent reading by the fire, Owen teaching Joseph to whittle. The first time Emma asked him to help her with Daisy's saddle. The night Prudence finally shared Owen's bed, discovering a passion she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. As autumn painted the Wyoming landscape in gold and crimson, Prudence began teaching at the Dusty Creek School. Owen had spoken to the town council, vouching for her experience and character. With qualified teachers in short supply, they'd been glad to offer her the position. "How was your first day?" Owen asked when she returned home, her face flushed with excitement despite her evident exhaustion. "Challenging, rewarding, 15 students ages 6 to 16 with wildly different abilities." She sank into a chair, accepting the cup of tea he offered. "I'd forgotten how much I love it. They're lucky to have you." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Just as I am." Late October brought the first snowfall and an unexpected visitor. Prudence was helping the twins with their reading lessons when the sound of an approaching wagon drew them to the window. "Riders coming," Joseph announced. Owen came in from his study, hand instinctively checking the gun at his hip, a habit from years of frontier living. He relaxed when he recognized the driver. "It's just Morris from the livery," he told Prudence. "Though I wasn't expecting anyone." They watched as the wagon stopped in the yard. Morris helped a woman down, petite, well-dressed, with dark hair beneath an expensive bonnet. Even from a distance, Prudence could see she was beautiful, Owen's face drained of color. "It can't be," he whispered. "Owen, who is that?" But he was already moving, striding across the yard with long, urgent steps. Prudence followed more slowly, an inexplicable dread building in her chest. The woman turned as Owen approached. Her face lit up with recognition, then crumpled as she threw herself into his arms. "Owen." "Oh, thank God I found you." Prudence stopped, frozen, as Owen held the sobbing woman. Over her head, his eyes met Prudence's, filled with shock and confusion. "Prudence," he called, his voice strained. "This is Lillian, my sister-in-law." Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by concern at the woman's obvious distress. Owen guided Lillian inside, where Hank provided hot coffee laced with whiskey to calm her nerves. The children were sent to play outside, sensing adult matters were being discussed. "I've been searching for you for almost a year," Lillian explained, her hands trembling around the cup. "After Samuel died." "Samuel," Owen interrupted. "Your husband, my brother," she nodded. "Consumption last winter." Tears welled in her eyes. "I tried to manage alone, but the creditors took everything. Then I remembered you'd mentioned Wyoming in your last letter years ago." "How did you find me?" Owen asked, still looking stunned. "I didn't know if I would. I've been traveling town to town, asking about you. In Cheyenne, a cattle buyer recognized your name, directed me here." She glanced at Prudence. "I didn't know you'd remarried." Owen took Prudence's hand. "This is my wife, Prudence. Prudence, Lillian was married to my younger brother. The last time I saw her was before the war." "You're welcome here, Lillian," Prudence said sincerely. "Please stay as long as you need." Gratitude washed over the woman's tired face. "Thank you, I won't impose for long, just until I can find work in town, perhaps." "Nonsense," Owen said firmly. "Your family, there's plenty of room." That night, after Lillian had been settled in the guest room, Prudence and Owen spoke privately in their bedroom. "I'm sorry for the shock," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I hadn't heard from Samuel in years, assumed he was still in St. Louis." "There's nothing to apologize for. She's your family, our family now." He drew her into his arms. "Thank you for understanding." Prudence rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Tell me about your brother." Samuel was 4 years younger, brilliant but restless. Never fought in the war, bad lungs kept him out. He and Lillian married young. A shadow crossed his face. There was a falling out after my first wife died. Things said in grief that couldn't be unsaid. We wrote occasionally, but... And now he's gone, Prudence finished softly. Yes. The word held years of regret. And his widow has traveled halfway across the country to find me. I can't turn her away. Of course not. Prudence squeezed his hand. We'll help her start over, together. Lillian's presence brought new dynamics to the household. She was cultured, educated, with the refined manners of Southern gentry. Initially, Prudence felt awkward beside her, conscious of her own simpler background, but Lillian proved genuinely kind, helping with the children and household tasks despite her obvious lack of domestic experience. I never learned to cook properly, she admitted one evening, watching Prudence prepare dinner. We always had servants. And now you're stuck helping in the kitchen, Prudence said with a smile. Life takes unexpected turns, indeed it does. Lillian's gaze drifted to where Owen sat by the fire, reading to the twins. You're fortunate, you know. Owen is a good man. I remember how devoted he was to his first wife. Something in her tone made Prudence look more closely at her sister-in-law. You knew her well, Caroline. Yes, we were close, she was. Lillian hesitated. Everything I wasn't, practical, capable, maternal. Owen adored her, and their children. Pain flickered across Lillian's face. Elizabeth was 4, Michael just 2. Yellow fever is merciless. She touched Prudence's arm. I shouldn't speak of such things, forgive me. No, I want to know. Prudence kept her voice low. Owen rarely talks about his first family. It helps to understand what he lost. He lost everything. After they died, he simply disappeared. Samuel tried to find him, but Owen didn't want to be found. I think he believed he'd failed them somehow. The insight helped Prudence understand Owen's occasional dark moods, the way he sometimes watched her children with a mixture of joy and remembered pain. As November deepened, Lillian became a fixture in their lives. She had a gift for storytelling that entranced the children, particularly Emma, who blossomed under the elegant woman's attention. Even Owen seemed to find healing in reconnecting with this link to his past. But Prudence noticed other things too. How Lillian's hand sometimes lingered on Owen's arm, how her reminiscences often centered on times before his first marriage, the way her eyes followed him when she thought no one was watching. You're imagining things, Hank said when Prudence cautiously voiced her observations. Miss Lillian's just grateful to have found family. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps her concerns were merely the insecurities of a second wife, one who couldn't compete with the ghosts of the past or the shared history Lillian represented. Then came the night of the winter storm. Howling winds drove snow against the windows as the family gathered close to the fire. Owen had been delayed checking on the livestock, leaving Prudence, Lillian, and the children to start dinner without him. When he finally arrived, snow crusted on his coat and hat, Lillian rushed to help him, hands lingering as she brushed the snow from his shoulders. You're frozen through, she exclaimed. Sit by the fire while I fetch you whiskey. Owen caught Prudence's eye over Lillian's head, a slight frown creasing his brow. Later, when they were alone in their bedroom, he brought it up. You've been quiet tonight. Is something troubling you? Prudence hesitated, not wanting to seem petty or jealous. Lillian seems very attached to you, understanding dawned in his eyes. Ah, you've noticed, so I'm not imagining it, he sighed, sitting beside her on the bed. No. There was a time before I met Caroline when Lillian expected I might court her. Then I introduced her to Samuel and, he shrugged, she made her choice. And now she's a widow who has lost everything, clinging to the past because the future terrifies her. He took Prudence's hands in his. But my past and future are clear to me. I mourned Caroline and our children. That grief will always be part of me. But you, Prudence, you and your children are my present and my future. Never doubt that. He sealed his words with a kiss that left no room for doubt, and that night their lovemaking held a fierce tenderness that swept away her lingering concerns. The next morning, Prudence found Lillian alone in the kitchen, already preparing breakfast. You're up early, Prudence observed, moving to help with the coffee. Couldn't sleep. Lillian's smile was strained. Too many thoughts. Prudence took a deep breath, deciding directness was best. Lillian, I need to ask you something. Your feelings for Owen are entirely appropriate for a sister-in-law, Lillian interrupted smoothly. Whatever I might have felt years ago is long past. I apologize if I've made you uncomfortable. It's not that. I just want to be sure we understand each other. Owen is my husband. The children and I are his family now. Lillian's composure slipped momentarily, revealing a flash of something resentment. Loss, but she quickly recovered. Of course, I'm grateful for your hospitality, Prudence, truly, and I've been thinking it might be time for me to move on. Perhaps to California. I have a friend in San Francisco who's offered me a position as a companion. Relief and guilt warred in Prudence's chest. You don't have to leave on my account. It's not just that. Lillian's smile turned sad, being here, seeing Owen with his new family. It reminds me too much of what I've lost, what might have been in another life, understanding dawned. You loved him before Samuel, Lillian nodded, vulnerability replacing her usual poise. Always. Even after I married his brother, foolish, wasn't it? But we can't choose who we love. She straightened her shoulders. Don't worry, I would never act on those feelings. Owen has found happiness again. I won't interfere with that. The honest admission created an unexpected bond between the women. When Lillian departed 2 weeks later, bound for San Francisco, Prudence embraced her with genuine affection. Write to us, she urged. Let us know you're well. I will. Lillian's eyes were bright with unshed tears as she turned to Owen. Take care of them, Owen. You've been given a rare second chance. So have you, he replied, kissing her cheek. Samuel would want you to find happiness. As the stagecoach pulled away, Owen slipped his arm around Prudence's waist. You're an extraordinary woman, Prudence Blackwood. How so? Most wives wouldn't have been so understanding about having a love-struck sister-in-law under their roof. She smiled up at him. Most husbands wouldn't have been so blind to said sister-in-law's feelings. He laughed, the sound warming her despite the winter chill. Touché, now let's get home. I believe you promised the children we'd decorate for Christmas today. Christmas at the Double B was a joyous affair. Owen spared no expense, ordering gifts from as far away as New York. For Emma, a set of watercolor paints she'd admired in a catalog. For the twins, carved wooden animals and their own pocket knives with strict instructions about proper use. For Prudence, a locket containing miniature portraits of the children that he'd secretly commissioned. But the greatest gift came after the new year when Prudence discovered she was expecting a child. Are you certain? Owen asked, his voice hushed with wonder when she told him. As certain as one can be, Dr. Peterson confirmed it yesterday. Joy transformed his features as he swept her into a gentle embrace. A baby, he whispered against her hair, our baby. The news delighted the children, though each reacted differently. The twins bombarded her with practical questions about where the baby would sleep and whether it would be a boy or girl. Emma grew protective, insisting on helping her mother with chores and watching her like a hawk for signs of fatigue. As spring turned the Wyoming landscape green again, Prudence's body softened with new life. Owen became endearingly overprotective, hiring additional help for the house despite her protests that she was perfectly capable of continuing her duties. Humor me, he said, kissing her forehead. I missed these moments the first time around. Let me fuss over you now. The town council granted her leave from teaching with a promise that her position would be held for her return. In the meantime, Owen built a nursery adjoining their bedroom, his hands crafting a cradle from cherry wood with the same care he'd once shown building the house itself. For someone who claims to have had little joy in his life, you smile quite a lot these days, Prudence observed one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. I have much to smile about. His hand rested on her rounded belly, feeling the baby's movements beneath his palm. A year ago, I was a lonely man with a successful ranch and an empty house. Now I have a family. He kissed her softly. You saved me, Prudence. We saved each other, she corrected. That day in the market when you said my children would eat at your table, you couldn't have known where it would lead. perhaps not consciously, but something in me recognized something in you, a matching piece to my broken one. She leaned against his shoulder, content in the growing twilight. Do you ever regret it, taking on a widow with 3 children? Never, not for a single moment. His arm tightened around her. Your children have become mine in every way that matters, and now this little one, he patted her belly gently, will bind us even closer. In August, as the wheat fields ripened to gold under the Wyoming sun, Prudence gave birth to a daughter. The labor was difficult but mercifully shorter than her previous deliveries. Owen remained nearby throughout, his face pale with worry until the midwife placed the swaddled infant in his arms. She's perfect, he whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he gazed at the tiny features. Prudence, look what we've made. They named her Hope for what she represented in both their lives. She had Owen's storm-gray eyes and a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as black as his. The other children crowded around, marveling at their tiny sister. Even Emma, now 10 and increasingly conscious of her dignity, couldn't resist cooing over the baby's perfect fingers and toes. Can she sleep in my room sometimes? She asked, surprising both parents with her eagerness. When she's a bit older, Prudence promised, watching the transformation in her eldest child. Motherhood had changed Emma just as it had changed her. Life settled into new rhythms around the baby. Owen proved to be a devoted father, as comfortable rocking Hope in the middle of the night as he was managing ranch hands or breaking horses. Prudence recovered her strength gradually, savoring the precious moments with her newborn while still attending to her other children's needs. By the following spring, with Hope crawling determinedly across the ranch house floor, Prudence returned to teaching part-time. Owen had hired a young woman from town to help with the baby during school hours, though he often rearranged his own schedule to care for Hope himself. The men think it's peculiar seeing the boss with a baby on his hip, Hank commented one day, watching Owen point out various ranch operations to the wide-eyed infant. The men can think what they like, Owen replied easily. My daughter should know her father's work. 5 years passed in the blink of an eye. The Double B flourished under Owen's management, expanding to become one of the largest operations in the territory. The twins, now 10, were sturdy boys with their mother's practical nature and their stepfather's love of the land. Emma, 15 and blossoming into beauty, showed remarkable artistic talent that Owen encouraged with lessons from a painter in Cheyenne. And Hope, their bridge between past and future, grew into a spirited child with her father's determination and her mother's compassion. She followed Owen everywhere, absorbing ranch knowledge like a sponge, equally at home in the saddle or helping Prudence with household tasks. On the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Owen surprised Prudence with a trip to Denver, just the two of them, while Hank and their capable housekeeper, Mrs. Fletcher, watched the children. 5 years, Owen mused as they dined in the elegant hotel restaurant. Sometimes it feels like yesterday I saw you standing in that market square. And sometimes it feels like we've always been together, Prudence replied, reaching across the table to take his hand. At 33, she was more beautiful than ever, confidence and happiness having added a glow that hardship had once dimmed. Do you ever regret it? He asked, echoing her question from years before. Marrying a broken old rancher, she smiled, the love in her eyes undimmed by the passing years. You were never broken, Owen, just waiting as I was, and at 42 you're hardly old. Later, in the privacy of their hotel room, they made love with the same passion that had marked their relationship from the beginning. Afterward, lying in his arms, Prudence felt a contentment that seemed to fill every corner of her being. I have something to tell you, she said, tracing patterns on his chest. Something I've suspected for a few weeks now. He raised an eyebrow. Should I guess you're going to be a father again? Joy lit his face as he pulled her closer. Truly, Hope is getting a brother or sister? Yes, doctor. Peterson says the baby should arrive in early spring. Owen's hand moved to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. Have I told you today how much I love you, Prudence Blackwood? You have, but I never tire of hearing it. Then let me show you as well, he murmured, drawing her into another embrace. They returned to the ranch refreshed and glowing with their shared secret, though it didn't remain secret for long. The children were thrilled at the prospect of another sibling, each making plans for what they would teach the new baby. That winter was particularly harsh, with blizzards isolating the ranch for weeks at a time. But within the sturdy walls of the house Owen had built, the family created their own warmth. Evenings were spent reading aloud, playing games, or simply talking by the fire. The twins worked on improving their whittling under Owen's tutelage. Emma painted portraits of the family that captured their essence with remarkable skill. Hope helped her mother prepare for the new baby, solemnly folding tiny clothes and suggesting increasingly improbable names. In March, as the first crocuses pushed through the melting snow, Prudence gave birth to a son. The labor was easier this time, and by dawn, she was propped up in bed, cradling the infant while Owen looked on with undisguised adoration. "He has your eyes," Owen observed, touching the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. "What shall we call him?" Prudence had been considering names for months, but in that moment only one seemed right. What about Thomas Owen, to honor both the men who helped shape our family? Emotion filled Owen's eyes. "You would name him after your first husband. Thomas gave me my first 3 children and taught me to be strong. You gave me hope and this little one and taught me to love again. Both deserve to be remembered." Owen kissed her forehead, then the baby's. "Thomas Owen Blackwood, a fine name for a fine boy." As spring bloomed across the Wyoming territory, the family's joy was complete. The children adored their new brother, and Owen proved as devoted to his son as he was to his daughter. Prudence recovered quickly, resuming her teaching and household duties with the efficient grace that characterized everything she did one evening in early summer as the family gathered on the porch after supper. Prudence looked around at the life they had built together. Emma sketching in the fading light, the twins playing checkers with Hank. Hope reading to baby Thomas, making up stories to go with the pictures in the book. And Owen, her steady, loving Owen, watching them all with quiet contentment. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, noticing her gaze. "I was just thinking about that day in the market, how desperate I felt, how alone." She squeezed his hand. "And then you said those words that changed everything." "Your kids eat at my table," he recalled with a smile. "You couldn't have known what would come of it." "No," he agreed. "But I hoped, something about you called to me, Prudence, something that recognized its match." She leaned against his shoulder, savoring the peace of the moment. "Do you know what I love most about our story?" "What's that?" "That it isn't over, that we're still writing it every day." Owen's arm tightened around her as the Wyoming sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "And we will be, my love, for many years to come." As darkness fell and stars appeared above the Double B Ranch, Prudence Blackwood counted her blessings. 5 beautiful children, a home filled with love, and the man beside her who had transformed her darkest hour into the beginning of her greatest joy. From that chance meeting in a market square had grown a love that would sustain them through whatever the frontier might bring, a love as vast as the Wyoming sky and as enduring as the mountains that watched over them. A love born of compassion, nurtured by respect, and strengthened by the shared journey of 2 souls who had found in each other exactly what they needed, exactly when they needed it most.